Welcome to Beyond the Dark. I'm Victor Nocta. Supermarkets are commonplaces, part of our daily lives. Bright hallways, organized shelves, people coming and going. But what if I told you that after hours, when the doors close and silence takes over, these places can become settings for something much more sinister? Prepare to enter a world where the banal turns into the terrifying. These are real supermarket horror stories. Are you ready to listen? It was an ordinary day, or at least it seemed to be. I was working an extra shift at the supermarket where I have been working for a few months. It was almost midnight, and the place was silent, except for the occasional hum of the air conditioning and the sound of my footsteps echoing through the hallways. There's something strange about the supermarket at night. It's as if the hallways are getting longer, the fluorescent lights are blinking on purpose, and the silence is heavy in the air. That night, I was in charge of organizing the canned goods section. I was alone, as the manager had left early, and the security guard was at the entrance, probably napping. As I was stacking cans of beans, I noticed something strange. In the next hallway, I heard a faint noise, like the sound of cans rolling across the floor. I went to check, thinking that maybe I had dropped something without realizing it. But the hall was empty. No dropped cans, no signs of mess. I decided to ignore it and went back to my work. A few minutes later, the sound returned, this time louder. It was as if someone was knocking over several cans at the same time. I went to the hallway again, but it was the same. I started to feel uncomfortable. My heart accelerated, and that silence, once common, now seemed unbearable. I decided to check the security cameras in the office. Maybe it was just a glitch in the system, I thought, or with luck, some lost customer I hadn't seen. As I looked to the monitors, I froze. The hallway I was in showed something strange. A dark, somewhat blurry figure seemed to be standing right where I had just organized the cans. I stood frozen for a few seconds, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. The figure had no face, just a dark blur, like a shadow, but standing still. I looked out the office window into the hallway, but I didn't see anything. I looked back at the cameras, and the figure had disappeared. Essa altura, meu corpo estava alerta total. Decidi andar pelos corredores, mesmo com o medo me dizendo para ficar no escritório. Peguei uma lanterna e fui. Os corredores estavam vazios, mas a sensação de que eu não estava sozinho me acompanhava. Era como se estivesse algo observando, esperando. As I passed the meat section, I felt goosebumps. It wasn't just the cold of the refrigerated environment. There was something more. One of the refrigerator doors was open, and I could have sworn I had closed it before. As I approached to close it, I saw something reflected in the glass. It wasn't my reflection. It was that again, the shadow. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty hallway. My breathing was heavy, and my head was starting to spin. I decided it was time to get out of there. I wasn't going to wait until the shift was over. I went to the entrance, but when I arrived, the security guard wasn't there. Just his radio, lying on the floor. Chame pelo nome dele, mas neo obtive resposta. Foi, quando houve uma risada. Neo era uma risada humana. Era algo distorcido, como som vindo velho radio fora de sintonia. Vinha do corredor dos congelados. Meu instinto dizia para correr, mas, por algum motivo, meus pés me levaram a lá. When I arrived, the hallway was empty except for something on the floor. It was the security guard's badge. I took the badge, but as I stood up, I felt a presence behind me. I didn't have the courage to look. The laughter grew louder, almost deafening. That's when the supermarket lights went out. Neo lembro exatamente como consegui ser dali. So sei que corri sem olhar para trás, atravessando as portas automáticas e entrando na rua deserta. Desde aquela noite, nunca mais voltei ao supermercado. Ouvi dizer que ficarem o lugar poucos dias depois. Dizem K FOI por problemas financeiros. Mas eu sei quem neo FOI por isso. Something lives in that place. Something that is not of this world. And I hope to never cross paths with that again. I work in a 24-hour supermarket in a small town. It's quiet, not many customers after midnight. Normally, it's just me, the security guard, and the cleaning staff. But last Thursday, something strange happened. Something that still makes me avoid going near that corridor. It was almost 3 a.m., and there was practically zero movement. I was at the checkout, killing time with videos on my cell phone, when I noticed something in the corner of my eye. The automatic doors. They opened and closed. I thought it was a customer coming in, but no one came. I looked at the security guard, Eduardo, who was on camera. He just shrugged, as if to say, "It must be the wind." I thought it was plausible and went back to my cell phone. But then, the doors opened again. This time, they didn't close. I stared, waiting for someone to appear. Nothing. Just that repetitive mechanical sound, as if the engine was stuck. Eduardo left the camera room to check. As soon as he got close to the doors, they closed by themselves. He laughed and joked, "Does Ghost like playing with doors now?" I laughed along, but something about the way he looked at the doors bothered me, as if he wasn't entirely convinced. About half an hour later, I went to the back of a store near the coolers. I was rearranging some shelves when I heard footsteps. I thought it was Eduardo or the cleaning team. I shouted something like, "If you need help, call me." No response. The footsteps stopped. Strangely, they stopped right behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. Just the tall shelves surrounding me. I felt a chill run up my spine, but I shook my head, trying to ignore it. He must have been tired. I continued my work, but I noticed that the environment was becoming different. The sound of the refrigerator seemed quieter, almost muffled. The air felt colder than it should be, and I felt like I was being watched. I turned around again, and this time I swear I saw something move between the hallways. I didn't see clearly what it was, but it looked human. Just too fast to be someone from the store. I called Eduardo on the radio, but there was no answer. I decided to go to the security room. When I got there, his chair was empty. The main monitor showed something that made me freeze. The hallways were dark, much darker than they should be. Only aisle 8 was lit, and the lights flickered. I went straight to the radio again, almost shouting, "Eduardo, where are you?" Nothing. I knew I needed to check out aisle 8. I grabbed flashlight and went, feeling my heart beat faster with each step. When I got there, there was no one there. Just the usual shelves and the sound of my own breathing. But something was wrong. The shelves. They seemed taller, closer, like the hallway was closing in around me. Then, I saw something on the floor, Eduardo's radio. It was broken, as if it had been stepped on. When I bent down to pick it up, the lights went out for good. Only my flashlight lit the way. That's when I heard it. A low, dragging sound, as if something was moving slowly. Somehow, I knew it wasn't Eduardo. I got up and started walking backwards, pointing the flashlight in all directions. Then I saw it. A tall, thin silhouette with abnormally long arms, walking out from the end of the corridor. It didn't move like a person. It was as if he were slipping, dragging himself across the floor without really walking. I ran. I didn't look back, not for a second. I only stopped when I reached the supermarket entrance. The doors were open, but Eduardo wasn't there. I called the police, who arrived within minutes. They looked for Eduardo and checked the cameras, but the files were corrupt. Aisle 8. It was exactly as before, bright and perfectly normal. Eduardo was never found. What about automatic doors? They still open and close on their own from time to time. Nobody works there at night anymore. I shouldn't be there. It was late at night, and the supermarket was closed to the public. But my job as a maintenance technician didn't give me time off. Check the ventilation system, they said. It's fast. It's never fast. Cold fluorescent light illuminated the empty hallways as I walked with tool in hand. The main ventilation was in the back, near the warehouse, and the system had gone off a strange alarm during the night. I walked between the shelves full of products, the sound of my footsteps echoing. Something about the absolute silence made me uncomfortable. Maybe it was the shadows that seemed longer than usual. I reached aisle 12, where the control panel was. As soon as I opened the toolbox, I noticed a low, almost imperceptible sound. A murmur. I thought it was the ventilation system. I placed my hand on the metal and felt a vibration, as if something was passing through the ducts. So far, so good. Old fans always make noise. But the murmur turned to a whisper. It didn't come from the system. I remained silent, trying to locate the sound. It sounded like it was coming from the next hallway. I walked slowly, my flashlight illuminating the products on the shelves. When I turned a corner, I saw something that made me stop. A shopping cart in the middle of the aisle, empty. I didn't remember seeing him when I passed by there before. I took a step back, and he moved, slightly, as if someone had gently pushed it. I swallowed hard and walked towards him. There was no one. I sighed, trying to stay calm. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe a cleaner had stopped by before leaving. Suddenly, the lights started to flicker. I looked around, feeling my chest tighten. The murmur returned, louder now. It wasn't words. It was something between a cry and a laugh. I looked up at the ventilation ducts. Something moved inside, something that seemed too heavy to be just air. When the light stabilized, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. At the end of the hallway, near the freezer, there was a figure, tall, hunched over, with her face turned towards me. It had no eyes, just deep shadows where they should have been. I stood transfixed as she tilted her head, as if studying me. The murmur turned into a shrill sound, almost like a scream. I started running, leaving my tool and everything behind. I passed the cart, the corridors, the entrance. When I reached the glass door, it didn't open. It was locked. I turned back, and the figure was closer, in the main hallway. Without thinking twice, I ran to the control room. I locked the door and looked for something, anything, to protect myself. The security camera was on, showing the hallways. The figure was no longer there. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. That's when I heard the sound of metal scraping against glass. I looked at the camera again, and it was outside the room, looking directly into the lens. The screen went black, and the last thing I saw was my reflection in the window. But I wasn't alone.